Hi everyone, thanks for joining me today. Today's project is a Loom knit mermaid video. We are doing a video on a blanket, so you will need a 41 peg loom, and I will list everything in the description box on what else you need. I hope you enjoy this video. This is not a weekend project, but it shouldn't take you that long, and you will need about 4 skeins of yarn if you use the same type of yarn that I'm using. So let's get started. We're going to start by making a slip knot. And we're going to place it right beside the anchor peg. We're going to do the E-wrap cast on, and that's making little E's on every peg of the loom. Now we're not going to join the circle. We're going to go back the other way. Once we get to the anchor peg on the other side, that the anchor peg is our meeting place, and we're going to go back and forth between the two. So I will show you what I mean once we get there. Okay, now we wrapped until the anchor peg. We are going to go the other way now. So again, we're going to make an E-wrap. Now remember, we're not going to knit around. We have to stop once we get to the anchor peg and go the other way. This is going to create a slit in the mermaid blanket. So it's very important. It'll help the person or whoever you're making this for, baby, get into the blanket. So we want to make sure that that's open and not closed. Okay, now we're on the other side. So again, we don't want to continue, or we're going to close our circle. We want to keep our circle with a slit. So we're going to use this peg as a turning peg. But first, we're going to knit over. So we're going to do that by taking the bottom stitch over the top all the way around the loom. Again, we're going to take the bottom stitch over the top, and this will complete our first row, and we will be cast it on to the loom. It is very important once you're done knitting over that you push your rows down when you're doing the E-wrap stitch. It just makes things a lot easier. Now we're going to continue going the other way, except we're not going to knit the first peg. So don't knit the first peg and start with the second peg doing the E-wrap. This is going to create a very nice looking edge for you. So again, continue going until you hit the peg where you turn and go the other way. We're going to continue this method, knitting back and forth. And again, remember, do not knit completely around. Once you get to the peg, you'll want to go the other way. You can do anywhere from 25 to 30 rows, depending on how many rows you'd like. I'm doing around 30 rows. Okay, I've got my 30 rows done. Now what I'm going to do is match up. We're going to kind of make a brim of a hat. You know how you pull up the inside to make a brim of the hat, except this is obviously much bigger. So, and it's not connected, but it's the same process of bringing your work up through the middle of the loom and attaching the loops. So there I did the first one, and it's real easy once you get started. So you're just going to go down the whole line and attach the loop to the peg. And this will give us a nice thick opening for our blanket. So go along the whole way, and I'll show you here how easy it is to match. It just goes right down the line, and it's real simple. Now that we've done that, we're going to again take our bottom stitch and put it over the top. This will connect the two pieces together. So again, take the bottom and go over the top and follow that the whole way around. Okay, we're done with that. So now we are going to focus on the body of our blanket. Depending on who you are making this for and how big they are, each blanket can differ. It doesn't have to be an exact amount or an exact amount of rows for each person. This pattern can vary. So I'm making this for my daughter, so I'm going to measure her and do this according to her. So whoever you're making it for, you'll want to make the body as big as the person. So here we are back to the anchor peg almost. So instead of turning, I'm going to continue. As you can see we're back. Just continue wrapping. So every peg has a stitch on it. Now we're gonna again knit over. So you want to take the bottom over the top. And do that the entire way around the loom. And just keep wrapping until you get your blanket to how long you want it to be. Okay, I'm finishing the body of my blanket and it is about 90 rows. So now we are going to do the basic bind off and remove the body of the blanket off the loom. So we wrapped that peg. Now we're going to move it over to the right and knit over. Once we do that, we're going to remove this stitch off of the peg and move it back to the left. Now we're going to wrap the next stitch and knit that over. Remove that stitch and place it on the stitch to the right. Then we're going to knit that over. Now we'll remove that stitch, put it on the peg to the left, and we're going to do a knit again. Knit over, remove that stitch, put it to the right. Again, we're doing the basic bind off.
Attention. Low battery.
Now we're going to remove that stitch and place it on our empty peg. And we will continue doing this. So we'll knit that over, remove this peg, put it to the right, knit over, tighten that peg, and we'll do the same. It's the same process going all the way around the loom. What we're doing is we're removing the body of the blanket off the loom. And this is called the basic bind off. We're at the end of the blanket, so the last two pegs you will knit over, remove the peg, put it to the right, tighten it a little, and then knit over. Now we're going to clip our working yarn with a pair of scissors. And we're going to take our working yarn through this last loop and tighten it. Now we'll take the yarn that we cut, should be about 5 or 6 inches or so, and we're gonna weave it in. And this is how it's looking. Now we're gonna start on the actual tail part. So go ahead and make a slip knot and place it on the anchor peg. I also placed a an orange stitch marker halfway around the loom, as you can see here. This is where we're going to E-wrap to. We're going to go ahead and cast on. So we're going to use the E-wrap cast on. Now we're going to knit over by taking the bottom loop and placing it over the top. So again, we're taking the bottom, we're placing over the top of the peg, over the top stitch. And this is the E-wrap cast on. Go ahead and push your cast on stitches down. We're going to continue. Now we're not going to knit the first peg, we're going to start on the second peg. So again, we're going to skip the first peg and do the second peg, and that creates the nice even border. We're just making the little E's again. We're going to go back and forth. We're going to continue this process for 5 rows. Our 5 rows are done. Now we're going to start increasing. So we're going to knit and add one. So I will show you how that's done. So wrap around the peg and front and then start your E-wrap. So again, we're increasing. Now when you get to your orange stitch marker, you'll want to stop. And then we're going to knit over. So stop at the orange stitch marker and then we're going to knit over. Make sure to push down your stitches. Now we're going to do our increase on the other side. So we'll take our working yarn, wrap the peg in front, and then E-wrap. All the way around to the other side. So again, we're going to wrap the peg that has nothing on it. So we're going to go to the right and wrap that peg and then E-wrap all the way over. Then we're going to knit off. And we'll be adding to the peg that only has one loop on it, as you can see. So you'll be able to knit over that peg as well. See? Right at the end. So go ahead and do that. We're going to continue this process until we get to the first two pegs by the anchor peg. So we will go on each side of the anchor peg. We will not wrap the peg above the actual anchor peg, but only the two beside, and I will show you. So for now, we're going to continue increasing by wrapping an extra peg on each side, E-wrapping, knitting over, then wrapping the other way. We're going to do this until we get to the first two pegs on top of the loom on both sides of the anchor peg. Our increase will be done when the 2 pegs beside the anchor peg are wrapped. So we're going to continue wrapping until we make it to those 2 pegs. Our increase is done. The 2 pegs on the side are wrapped. Now we're going to start decreasing. Go ahead and remove the first peg, put it to the right, tighten it, and knit over. Now we're going to E-wrap all the way to the other side. So I'm placing a stitch marker on the 21st peg on the side. That is where I'm going to decrease to. Okay, I made it to my stitch marker. So now I'm going to knit off. Now we're going to take our working yarn and knit the other way. Now we're going to continue with our decrease. We'll take this loop off and move it to the right. Decreasing a peg, we'll tighten the working yarn up and we will knit over, and then we will continue to E-wrap back to that stitch marker. Again, we're going to continue our decrease, remove the loop, put it to the right, and tighten. E-wrap until we meet the blue stitch marker. Continue this method until you reach your stitch marker. Now, I personally place my stitch marker one past of where I want to knit. That is my reminder that I do not want to knit on that stitch marker. I do not want to go any further. That is my clue that I am stitching right until that stitch marker. So try to keep that in mind. And like I said, just continue decreasing until you reach your stitch marker. This is creating the tail and the fin. You'll want to make two parts of this. So we will repeat the same method doing the other side of the tail. So what we're going to actually end up doing is making two tail parts and sewing them to our body. Once you get to your last stitch by the stitch marker, you'll want to take your working yarn, cut it almost like the bind off, remove the stitch and put the working yarn in between and make a knot. Then you'll weave in that working yarn. So again, you'll end up with one. Now we're starting the other side, and we're going to decrease going the other way. I've already wrapped my first peg and moved it over. So we're going to E-wrap down to the stitch mark. Once we get to the stitch marker, we will knit off and go the other way. Again, this tail is done in two parts. The first part is already attached to the body of the blanket, and now we are working on the second part of the tail. When we're done, we will sew everything together. I'm going to insert the part from the body of the tail in the next scene to show you exactly, again, how to get your yarn off the loom once you only have one peg left with a stitch on it. That way you can see it again in case you forget and you don't need to rewind. You can just pause. So it's just going to show you how you get the last stitch off the loom. And here we are again. I'm just inserting the part of getting the yarn off the loom. So this is previously, but it'll show you once you decrease. When you have that last stitch, you just move it over, knit over. Then you'll cut your working yarn. And you'll want to insert that piece of yarn through the loop and make a knot. And you will want to weave in all the loose ends that you have. You shouldn't have that many, but you will have maybe 3 or 4. Doing this will secure your ends to make sure your project doesn't come undone. So the second part of the tail is done. So I'm going to show you, this is the tail that it is attached to the body of the blanket. And now we're going to take the other part of the tail and sew it to the blanket. So we need to line it up. And what I like to do is just go down and match up the stitches and just sew it up as best you can. There are going to be a few places where the yarn is bunched up, and that is totally okay and normal, and it'll turn out just fine. So you'll want to use the rest of your yarn that you're using for this blanket to sew it up, and get a big darning needle and just go all the way up. I would recommend starting with the top first. You can start this wherever you want to sew it. I personally recommend starting at the top. It's a little easier in my opinion, but feel free to start at whatever point you want, as long as you're sewing it all together on the sides. Once your sewing is done, that will complete your mermaid blanket. That concludes our mermaid blanket loom knit video. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, please give me a thumbs up, and for more videos, please subscribe and let me know what you think in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Bye!